If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd rather just read about this than actually do it, you're not alone. The Enneagram 5 newsletter exists to help you move from knowing to experiencing. Every Saturday, you'll get insights designed to help fives grow without overwhelm. Sign up for free today at enneagram5.com/newsletter or visit the link in the description. Now on to the show. All right, Sam, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
We reached out at like the beginning of the year and we were like, hey, Sam, come record with us this season. She's like, okay. And then she didn't hear from us for like 8 months. And then I reached back out. I'm like, hey, Sam, we're going to record. Okay, I'm pregnant.
Like, you guys better record right away because I would be busy.
Yeah, very soon, actually. Well, we're glad you're here. We're glad we could fit it in. And this is actually a topic that's been widely requested across the community, which is the levels of health. And cool. Cody and I, we are not Enneagram experts, so we thought, hey, why don't we bring someone in who actually knows what they're talking about? And of course, we brought in our favorite person who knows what they're talking about, and that's Sam. So,
oh shucks.
Yeah, here we are.
So, Sam, what are the levels of health?
Do this whole episode for us.
And go.
Okay, so there's a bit of different thinking on this, but this originated from the Rizzo-Hudson theory model. You know, that's the big blue book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, that a lot of people have and use. And they have 9 levels of health for each type. And they're kind of like divided into 3. So it's healthy top 3, and then there's average 3, and then there's unhealthy 3. A lot of people don't like that language anymore because it's like judgmental. So people say, well, also integrated is the top, and then average, and then disintegrated. I don't know, pick your vocabulary for it. But basic idea is that a type, any type, but we're here to talk about 5, is going to look very different depending on how healthy you are, how much therapy you've done, probably, how much self-work you've done. And the more self-work you've done, the less you act like the stereotype traditional 5 or traditional type. That would be the overview, I guess.
Okay. And I think I've heard it called levels of development.
Yes.
As well. Okay. So the idea is that the more you work on yourself, the less you're a 5.
I don't think they say it like that, but that's how I think of it. It's like essentially it becomes very hard to type people who are very, very healthy. So have we talked about growth arrows before?
I don't think so.
So Cody and I did an episode on integration and disintegration, but we didn't actually talk about how it works.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, it was like a layman's episode.
So let's briefly touch on that. So one of the ideas within the Enneagram symbol is that there's arrows, lines connecting all the types to each other. And I'm just going to talk about 5s because it's going to get too complicated. For 5s, there's an arrow to 7 and there's an arrow to 8. And towards 7 would be the direction of disintegration, and towards 8 would be the level of integration, meaning that a much healthier 5 is going to start acting more like an 8. So that's what I mean by they wouldn't be like their type. If you have a very, very healthy 5, they're going to be more 8-like. Someone who doesn't know that much about the Enneagram might mistake them for an 8.
Okay, that makes sense.
in my opinion, it's less so with the other direction. Like the disintegration direction, you pick up like a bunch of the bad habits of the disintegrated of that type. So 7 in our case, but it's not like you start acting like a 7 where people would mistake you for a 7. So for 5s, it's like we get really scattered. We can't keep track of anything. Our minds are moving so fast. We can't calm them down. But we don't start being like, hey, everyone, let's go to the fucking roller coaster. Like we don't start like acting like a 7.
Yeah,
So-
I've gone through entire phases of my life where I was like disintegrating for an extended amount of time, and no one ever mistook me. Just kind of weird when I say it. For a 7, like that was never a thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
Like that, it was like that much separated from my core personality that it was like I took up all these other characteristics. But I definitely went through entire phases where I was full on taking that very scattered, impulsive, just picking up a lot of bad habits that are not typical to my personality.
Yeah. So this is a tiny bit tangential, although related topic. So for example, in parts of my life where I was really disintegrated or really stressed, at one point I lost my car keys, my wallet, my passport, all at the same time. Like I couldn't find jack shit. Like I couldn't keep track of anything. And I had no way to get new IDs because I lost everything. That's 7 like in the sense that 7s can't, are scattered and often can't keep their lives together when they're average levels. But again, like no one would have mistaken me for a 7. However, I have been mistaken for not necessarily an 8, but not a 5, like a more confident type after working my whole life on speaking and sharing my work and being more confident. So you can see it more with the healthier levels that people will think you're not a 5 anymore.
Yeah, you and Josiah have that in common, being mistyped.
Well, I was going to say one of the things too when I disintegrate is I like to create chaos. So even like I can get scattered on my own, but I also like to like make other people scattered.
Yeah, self-sabotaging and then sabotaging everything around you, just imploding. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do that.
And it also comes out when I get bored. That happens a lot too. So I don't know if that's a disintegration thing or if it's just me being bored and wanting to
being an asshole.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, unhealthy 5s basically want to burst other people's illusions. Like,
oh yeah. So let's talk about that. Should we start at the bottom and work our way up?
Yeah, I like that.
Sure.
Let's do that. We'll end in like pure like oasis.
Yeah. So a general note on this is like some people are saying now the top level or the top 2 levels even are like Buddha enlightenment, and like basically most people are never going to get there. It's more aspirational. And the bottom level is like psychosis. So probably we haven't personally experienced much of that, hopefully.
So a little bit of spiral dynamics in that way. Like you don't ever reach like the top colors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, the bottom level, like the most disintegrated, the most stressed, the most unhealthy for 5, it essentially for all 9 types, it's some type of, psychotic break. But for 5s, it's this like more like schizoid type of state.
What does that mean exactly?
Schizophrenic almost?
Like,
not schizophrenic exactly, but like reality ceases to matter. Like we all know we have our own world in our head that we can retreat to. This would be like retreated so far, lost all touch with the fact that there's a real world. You get like wild delusions of like whatever's going on in the head is reality with no way to check it because this person's going to be completely isolated.
Which we'll talk about. Mr. Robot?
No, I saw you talking about it. Now I want to watch it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it explores the lowest level, I think.
Yeah. So
in really cool ways.
I will say that, yeah, I've never been full on at this level, but I feel like I have skimmed the surface of it. And it is a very scary place to be.
Yeah. Say more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in different ways, like when I was younger and I was like in kind of my darkest times, I created this whole world in my head basically, and I was so isolated that I started to like lose touch with reality. And thankfully I brought myself back from that. But how this can kind of come up, or how this has come up more recently is, as I think that there's like some percentage of the population who, when they try THC, it makes them more paranoid.
Oh my God, I'm so in that percentage.
I am too. And so I've like, ever since I've started experimenting with that, there are times when I go too far and I'm like, oh boy, I've got to bring myself back from the precipice, because I'm like, thinking that Amy is a witch, and like she's creating like this alternate world around me. And like, I literally told her the first time this happened, I told her, I'm like, you are Wanda from WandaVision. And I was like, you're not like Wanda, you are Wanda. Like, she's like,
sounds really fun for her.
Yeah, she was like, okay, I'm going to bed now, so I'll see you later.
That reminds me actually of like, I know this, if you research this, they say this is impossible, but I have, even from CBD, that kind of thing happen.
Wow.
And I did like a big dose of CBD, being like, oh, it's relaxing. Everyone loves this to relax. And I had like the largest existential crisis meltdown that I've had. And like, I'm not a stranger to drug use at all, like that I've had in maybe my whole life, or at least since I was a teenager, where I was like, oh my God, the world is ending and like it's gonna end really soon. And what do we do? And it was like, what the fuck is happening to me? So yeah, I guess it would just be like that, but all the time.
This is strange to me because you guys both have like paranoid episodes with drugs, and you're both 4 wings, and I have the 6 wing. And I have the most pleasant time ever on all hallucinogenics, like anything THC. Like, I'm like that. Actually, like I go off the deep end until like, who gives a shit? So
that sounds amazing.
That does sound amazing.
Like, the way that I explain doing shrooms is like, it's literally like floating down a river of color, and you don't care where it's going.
I love mushrooms. Actually, this is just THC specific.
Sure, yeah, and THC does, like, it can cause problems for sure. Yeah, it's mushrooms are a whole different world.
I've only ever tried THC, so I have no reference for anything else.
Oh, you might have better luck, like with microdosing.
I might, yeah.
So basically, this would be like that, like the experience you're describing. There's like an enormous amount of fear, like terror involved. So I think, trying to relate it to something we've all had. We have probably all had the thing of like, the outside world is a problem. Like, it's trying to take me away from me. Like, relationships are a burden.
Yeah.
It would be like that to such excess that like doing anything that's connected in the world would be like terrifying.
Okay.
And this is where you would get like even suicide at the lowest level. It's like so much fear and like pain you can't run from, and you're just in your own psychosis anyway, that kind of stuff.
It's kind of an interesting thought, taking you into like religious context too, being in a low level plus being in like an evangelical time where like they already are trying to constantly separate you from the world and say the world is bad, and then in your mind you're also separating. It can be a pretty low place. Like, that's what that reminds me of, off the top of my head, the times that I was the lowest and the most separated, I think, from the world was when I was also being told from everyone around me that the world is bad and we're separate, but then I also feel separate from them too. So then it's like, where am I in this, and where do I even fit in? And so, yeah, that's just kind of what sticks out to me when you talk about that. It's just, that easily happens. I feel like that separateness anyway. And so like getting down into the lower levels and then being pushed from outside sources into that could be, yeah, definitely problematic.
I think when we talk about the next two that are like low, everything where all 3 of us are describing, that's in those 2 levels. But this would be like everything's ominous, everything's intrusive, all our enemies, like dark fantasies, insomnia, like just like pure crisis mode, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
So that's level 9 then.
Yeah. And I don't know if I have it differentiated enough to do like 8, 7, 6, 5, but the like maybe the next two together. So
Okay. 8 and
8
7.
and 7. That would be more like the stuff that people probably have experienced who are listening at the lowest points of their life. So that is extreme isolation. From the outside looking in, disappearance, often sudden disappearance from relationship.
Mm.
And then there's also like accompanying that, there's this belief that your isolation is righteous. Like,
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
well, the idea that like the outside people who want a relationship with me, they're basically a burden and they're incorrect. That relationship is worth anything. And all that's worth.
The enemy.
What did you say?
They become the enemy, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this comes from like it's good to separate and get away from them.
Yes. So push them away. And then all that matters is your work, whatever that is, whatever that means to you. All that matters is either your work or your internal world, depending.
Okay.
There's a bunch more stuff like this. I didn't really differentiate 7 and 8 that clearly in like my own thinking. But what I also have seen a lot with 5s and myself in the very unhealthy is secretiveness. And not just secretiveness like privacy, secretiveness for its own sake. Like you'll get 5s will start to make secrets on purpose to basically have a one-up on people. Like from their intimates. Like if they don't know about this, then I'm separate and separate is good.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, definitely done that in my life for sure.
Example, please.
Let's see. Okay, so going back to the religious circles, it was anytime that I was working in churches, we already are okay. So like we're already sexual beings, but in religious circles, and you're gonna love this as the sexpert, this entire topic. So we're already sexual beings. So like in the repression of evangelicalism towards all things like sexual, it was if you had sex with anybody or any kind of sexual relations with anyone at all while working in a church, you would immediately be fired. And so the heightened risk of being able to have sex with people and no one know about it made me want to do it more.
Yeah.
And so I liked having that, the rush of the high risk of that entire like aspect of my life being hidden with the idea that there would be a massive loss if people found out. But like it was an encouraged behavior in my own mind, right? Like I was okay with it. Like I was okay with the risk of it. And if it would all went to shit, then that was fine, which it did do. And I think I've talked about on this show. And so and I accepted it immediately right out of the gate. Like, okay, yep, you got me, and it's fine. We're going to move on from it because in my mind, it was never bad. So I didn't care. But the idea of no one knowing because to them, it was such a big deal was like, to me, that kind of plays into that for me, I guess. And definitely kind of played a part in my life for years in that way. And, and it's like you start looking for ways to do that. Not as much these days, but definitely before. Like it was like a game, and if
Yes, exactly. It's like a game thing. It's like you're essentially driving intimates away on purpose. It might not feel like it's on purpose in the moment, but you feel, intimacy feels really true, vulnerable intimacy feels really unsafe to 5s, especially average and below. So if you start touching on that, like, for example, if you're with a partner who's like starting to really get you and see through your ruse or whatever, then you're like, oh shit, like I'm not safe, I'm not isolated. oh, well, if I keep secrets from them, then I am isolated again.
Hmm.
So this can look like anything, but I mean, it can look like, hiding, drinking, like, whatever. But it's like this almost this intentional creation of secrecy, because it's the driving away of intimacy, it's the driving away of relationship, and the driving the self, the idea of the self, away from the body. So it's like pushing the body away as well. Anything that connects the five with their body, they'll just become disinterested in that. So this is where you would get a lot of extremes of self-neglect as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I spent a lot of time in this level, in one of these two levels. Probably, I would imagine maybe it's more the 7 than the 8, but spent a lot of time there because I feel pulls, like you're talking about, like the boredom aspect, Josiah, what you were talking about earlier, like wanting to implode your life or wanting to cause chaos, like another form of chaos in many ways are these secrets, right? And that distancing yourself, because it does like cause rifts in relationships. And so I think that that's been the biggest challenge for me post like religion, and being now in a relationship where someone does probably see me more than I am comfortable being seen all the time, and feeling that pull towards trying to find ways to be isolated, and then but not being okay with it anymore. Like that's such a weird tension of feeling my past self, which was in maybe lower levels of development, whereas now I hopefully I'm in higher levels. I guess we'll find out as you talk about them, but I definitely relate to this level a lot personally.
So one thing I'm really interested in this part in particular is I can definitely see how unconsciously I've done what you're talking about, like intentionally creating secrets to as sort of a means of isolating myself. On the other side of that, I don't like having secrets because it's so much work. I have to keep track of secrets. Yeah. And it just like, I don't have the energy for that. Like it just seems like a pain. And so have you guys experienced that as well?
That's how I feel now. I mean, for sure, in any healthier level, I think that's a reasonable perspective to hold.
Okay.
And I was just looking at Rizzo and Hudson's names for these. Level 8 is called Horrified Delirious. And level 7...
the name of my next prog rock band album.
Yes.
Anyway, okay, what's 7?
Oh my God, that's perfect. And then 7 is Nihilistic Eccentric.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm gonna have that tattooed on my forehead.
Yeah, like I feel like all three of us are like, yes, I am that. Like I am nihilistic eccentric. I don't think I've ever been horrified delirious. So I think we're mostly talking about level 7 here. Yeah. And 8 is closer to the psychosis stuff.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, that makes sense. All right.
Nihilistic eccentric is totally yeah. We need t-shirts that say that.
Oh, that's perfect for your t-shirts. So I didn't even touch on nihilism. So you get really cynical and really nihilistic here. And this is where you would want to burst the illusions of people, because you don't have any, according to yourself, you don't have any illusions of, for example, that like love exists. So, and so you're like, anyone who believes that is wrong. I'm going to go prove to them that like, there's no such thing as whatever. So, I mean, this can be terrible to be around. Luckily, 5s are self-isolating. So unlike some of the other types, we don't make this other people's problem that much.
What if we make a podcast about it, though? Because I hate to say it, but you haven't heard the episodes we've been recording.
Oh, God.
It's kind of a bubble burster.
Really?
I mean, we go some intense places, partially because of our community. I think a lot of the things that people have been requesting were pretty intense or controversial, like, polarizing topics, but also too, like, I mean, we've covered a lot of topics thus far, and in terms of conspiracy theories, like we've talked about a lot of things that are controversial topics that I feel like I mean, at least Josiah has a mission to bubble burst all over the place.
Cool.
I call it red pilling, but you know what?
Yeah. No, you're bubble bursting on everyone. I prefer that phrase.
No,
But
it's
yeah.
just it's one of those things where like I feel like the last, the last 2.5, 3 years have completely like deconstructed and reconstructed my whole model of reality. And a lot of the like conversations we've been having are just more out of like catharsis for me to get all of this out of my system and actually get it out in the open air and like, unpack it and talk through it and like work through it with the people around me, because I've been internalizing it for 2 years straight, basically. And the psychological impact that it's had on me has been very detrimental. And so that's been a big motivation for me. And actually like talking about this stuff this season is like, I just have to get it out of my head. And I should be going to a therapist, which I did start doing that again recently. So
good.
That's good.
Seems good.
But we already recorded most of those conversations before I did that.
Maybe there'll be like a trajectory of like by the end.
A story arc for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to do a season finale where we talk about, maybe we revisit them or something. Yeah, no, it's been kind of a crazy season, but yeah, so I think that's kind of where we've been living, is in this nihilistic, eccentrist place, mentally, as we have done this show. But yeah, hopefully we haven't projected it onto too many people at once.
I feel like we do our best to like bring a little light in at the end of our conversations.
Yeah, well, and honestly, it's been really fun this season in that regard. So I think it's been a fun place to explore that level without diving too deep, into those places. Like we're revisiting those places, but we're not living there. We're just visiting. But yeah, I feel like that's what comes to mind first when you say these levels. It's like, well, we've been kind of like visiting them just for I don't know, hopefully entertainment and helping other people purposes. But
I look forward to listening.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure.
When I think about the 9 levels of development for a 5, I agree with some of it, and other parts of it I don't agree with. But I do believe that we can go through different cycles of those levels, even in a single day, but just we don't stay there. I think mostly I'm in the average zone. Most of the time I'm usually in the average area, sometimes in the 4 area of high average. Every once in a while, I'll look and say, hey, I may be hitting the 2 level. I don't know if I'm very healthy at, the very best. I want to think that I could be there. And I do love finding new things, and I love discovering things and being open-minded. But I know that initially I'm not 100% open-minded with everything. I think if at my worst, my most unhealthy level, I think I've been a 7 before. And that was probably where the lowest level that I've been in. I've never really been so phobic or so oblivious or, at this scene of being suicidal, but I have done and seen things in myself that I was not happy with. And when I get to that level, I usually look at myself very clearly and very specifically, and I look where I'm falling because I know that it's time to change. So usually I don't get to those lower levels so much because I guess you could say I scare myself, but I don't like going to those lower levels because I don't like who I am.
All right, so we're on this is level 6? No, 7. 7 is
That was all 7. I had one more thing to say about 7, which is this is where relationships would be viewed as a waste of time or transactional. Like, if I need to get something from someone, okay, but otherwise, like, why would I bother? And anyone who's imposing on you in any way and perceived to be imposing, which like we would in this level perceive everything as imposing.
Yep.
It's like extreme resentment. Like, well, I'm not imposing anything on anyone. Why are they imposing on me? And like push everyone away.
That's convicting right there.
Oh yeah, I'm feeling really called out.
I don't bother you. Why are you bothering me right now?
Yeah, it is annoying.
Yeah, I do that. I do that all the time. Maybe I still am in this level. I was going to say that I'm in this level. I was in this level my entire like religious experience. I was never above this level ever. Like I never developed past this at any point because my environment didn't really allow me to, nor did I. But now that you say that, like now I'm doubting myself now. I'm like, maybe I'm still there. Everyone, why has everybody got to be an inconvenience? You know?
I don't think these are static things, right?
No, yeah, it's a ladder, right?
It's a very fluid sort of a thing, and you can kind of go between at different times of the day, even probably.
I think so. I mean, I think that's the general thinking on it. Another interesting thing and an interesting layer that we probably don't have time to get into, though, is with instincts and stacking, it's actually different. Like sexual dominance would be more elastic in how often they move between levels.
Ooh, interesting. I mean, we got all the time in the world. We make the rules. So like if you want to go into it, I'd be interested in hearing about it. I can always cut it out later.
Okay. Well,
have more information than not enough, you know.
The quick version. Really? You want more information? You like knowledge? So self-preservation people are more static, which would mean, Cody, that you would have stayed in the lower levels for longer. But as you climb, you would be more static in the higher. So, self-preservation dominants, they take longer to move, but once they move, they're pretty steady. And then social's kind of in between, and it depends on your stacking. But, famously, sexual dominance can be really healthy and then really unhealthy, like within days of each other.
Huh. But that's really interesting. And that's also why, I mean, maybe that's why sexual being in the middle of my stacking kind of comes into play here, because I was misdiagnosed by people that in the psychology world for being like potentially bipolar because of my cyclical just going up and down all the time. And that was not the case. It wasn't an accurate diagnosis. Turns out I'm on the spectrum. So it was a whole different thing. And so,
oh my God, wait, I missed all of this when like in season 1, you were like, I'm bipolar.
Right. Yeah. So it turns out I went through a test and scored insanely high on the Asperger's like test. So it was like undeniable.
So the thinking is basically, yes, Josiah, you move between levels and you can move quite often. And then we do see a difference between how frequently that happens depending on your stacking.
So we talked about sexual and self-preservation, but what about social? Like how does social work in that?
Social would be more in the middle, and it would be more driven by social, like expectations and social relationships. So I'd say they're in the middle. Let's get into, I want to tell a story, but I think get into 6 first.
Okay.
So 6 so now we're in average levels. All those ones we just did were unhealthy, disintegrated, right? So we get into the bottom of the average, which they've named extreme provocative.
Okay.
I don't know if I love the names, but some of them are good. That would be like the fear that others are going to threaten your niche of knowledge. So there's a lot of, in the average levels, like proprietary thinking about one's expertise. Like you're trying to kind of carve out your own corner of the world where no one else is, so that you don't have to deal with other people and you don't have to feel threatened. So in this lower level of the average, it's like, okay, you start to feel threatened. And this time I'm reading from their notes because my average notes are not that differentiated. This is where you also would enjoy subverting the beliefs of others, but this would be in relationship, kind of. Like we're back into, okay, maybe I'm in relationship with people sometimes, but I'm probably telling them weird shit and like bursting their bubbles all the time for fun. But I still probably want some kind of relationships with people. And you can get like bizarre ideas from fives at this level, or just because they're not checking, or I should say we're not checking ourselves with reality very much. It's pretty isolated still.
Okay. How does that look?
Which part?
What do you mean by that? Like the bizarre ideas?
Oh,
and-
okay. I can give you an example. So I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast. Fuck. I'm going to try to conceal the identity of this person. So there was a person I worked with kind of briefly who was a 5, very clearly brilliant. But whenever he talked about, and kind of a theorist and like an esoteric theorist, whenever he talked about his philosophies, you were just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this doesn't make sense at all. And it was like, he was like putting together like cosmos and like, you know, quantum physics. And you're like, I know you're brilliant. Like, I can tell, but the way you're integrating these theories is not working. Like, you're not testing this with anyone. You're just like sitting in your basement for a year, making a whole theory model, and then you're telling someone about it, but you're not ever being like, hey, check my thinking. So
Josiah when he's high.
yeah, maybe.
Exactly. I was just thinking, I have this note in my phone called high thoughts. And, and sometimes I'm not high when I have them, but I'm like, oh, that's a high thought. And
Yeah, it was trying to be nice. Yeah, sure.
It's so long. It's so long. And it's just full of gobbledygook. And I basically created my whole like framework of the universe.
Yeah. Josiah's manifesto.
So here's the thing, when we get to integrated, like 5s, I mean, often at least really are brilliant, but when we're shut away and we're just like what they say is tinkering, you know, tinkering endlessly, it doesn't help anyone. It's not actually useful in the practical world.
Yeah. I can really like I can think back to, I was very much this way all like even up into my late 20s. Where I would get these ideas, and a lot of mine usually had to do with like stuff I could build, like software wise, or like businesses I could do and things like that. And I would work all this stuff out in my head, but I'd be afraid to tell anyone because I like unconsciously didn't want them to poke holes in it, because in my head it's so brilliant, but you know, I couldn't deal with that reality of like, you know, having it confront, you know, actual reality and other people, and like, you know, a pragmatic look at things. And I remember that all that changed around the time when, you know, I was running my own business for a few years, and I just had to have so many conversations, like hard conversations with people, and like was constantly having like my ideas challenged. And I just sort of like got over the fear of that. And I remember I was talking with one of my mentors who knew me from earlier in my 20s. And I had this business idea and I took it to him. And when he started to give feedback, I could tell he was like being really tiptoey and like not wanting to be direct and like sugarcoating everything. I was like, wait, hold on. You don't have to do that with me anymore. Because I had like gotten past that point. I guess I'd sort of moved up these levels in that regard. But it used to be a huge problem for me.
That's much more 8-like of you.
Oh.
To just want to hear it direct.
Yeah, I'm definitely that way now.
5s are extremely rejection sensitive, and that's what's at play here in this level. And the one above it is like, and I remember this in my own life, it's like, if someone doesn't like this, I'm just gonna like crumble up and die. Like, I'm just gonna like give up on it forever if there's any critique. So that's, I think, what's behind a lot of the motivation of not sharing ourselves. But you know, ultimately you're not gonna have the best ideas if you have no one helping you.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's how I was for music for a long time. I think that's honestly what kept me from wanting to do music in a serious way for most of my adult life. is because of the fear that I either wasn't as good as I thought I was in my own head, or like nobody would like my ideas, or and all of these things. You know, I mean, I don't think that I was able to mentally or emotionally even get to a place where I could take those steps until we did the show. And so this is what helped me, I think, move past that and putting my thoughts out into the world with just being afraid of the repercussions all the time for the first few couple seasons, at least. Now I'm not so bad about it, but I'm a completely different person in just like a few years, basically. And so this show, I think, is what propelled me forward into hopefully up the higher levels, or at least accessing them for brief times. What was your story? You said you had a story.
Oh, I forgot about the story. Okay. So I'm sexual dominant, meaning that like I am really elastic with this. And even though I've worked very hard at getting to the higher levels, there was like maybe 4 or 5 months this year when I was finishing my dissertation, was doing a big push on that, where I became incredibly stressed. And I had gotten mad at my 5 friend the previous year because he just like dropped off the map. He went into a big work stress cycle, and he was like, we used to hang out all the time. Suddenly he's gone. He's like, oh, I'm busy with work for like 10 straight months. We were neighbors. I never saw him. I was like, what the fuck, dude?
Oh,
then
wow.
I just did the same shit, exactly the same, right after having experienced it myself and being like, oh, this is actually really annoying. I came out of the abyss, finished the dissertation. And then a bunch of people were like, where have you been? What is your problem? Like, that was really hurtful. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I know better. And it's still because of just the enormous amount of stress I guess I put myself under. That all got shut down. The idea that relationships are important that went away for that whole time period. And like, I knew the signs and I still didn't see them.
You know, what's funny is on the other end of that, I feel that I'm feeling a massive pull to pull away right now, like in my life, because of all the things that I have going on. But at least like 1/3 of everything that I'm doing right now requires me to not do that. You know, with this show, with music, trying to finish recording, like I have to stay social. Otherwise, none of those things will get done. So I'm having to tap into the very bottom of my stacking to just be like, you have to remain. Connections are important. Like you can't pull away. But I'm feeling so stressed with like wedding stuff, with moving now, which was not anticipated. It was a last minute like thing that was against our will, and we did not want to do it, but it happened and it kind of got thrown in the mix. And then I'm just feeling like that massive pull to be less social and just like do nothing productive for a certain amount of time, to try to like, I feel like I'm just like running on fumes. So like, I think I'm feeling this weird, like instinctual feeling of like wanting to recharge, but I can't. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of a strange feeling, I guess, to not be able to, but really, really want to.
It's probably good that you have that fail safe in place, stopping you from doing it all the way.
For sure. Yeah. Because I feel, I mean, I'm definitely like on the fringe of mental health at this exact juncture. Like, and I'm at least self-aware enough to recognize that and know that like I'm emotionally fairly unstable at this point. Like things can easily set me off, especially moving right now and being completely outside of my comfort zone as the self-preservation. Like I was flying off the handle before this episode, before we started recording, because I couldn't find things and I didn't know where things were. And I was just not okay about it. And I had to apologize profusely to Madison before we started and being like, I'm so sorry. Like I'm a terrible human being right now. Just ignore me. But yeah, I'm just all over the place. And I feel myself in conversations wanting to like not regress, but I guess regress, but pull away just constantly and just kind of live in my bubble, just to try to like get through the situation of any social environment, because I just can't deal with it.
Dude,
yeah.
Even though I am a social dominant, I was out of town last week for a work thing, and one of the conversations Cody and I have had earlier in the season is I'm telling my story just basically about realizing how much I had been disconnecting in my life and the effect that that was having on me. How like I got to the point where actually for most of my life I never really enjoyed life, and I would have little spurts of it. But I realized that so much of that was because of how I was disconnecting, and I found myself at the beginning of this trip. I used to love to travel, and I'm just like dreading the trip, and not wanting to be around people because I was exhausted. And the very first thing that they made us do at this work event was like, there were over 300 people there, and then they like split us up into 4 groups, and then in the group they split us up in half, and so it was basically like 2 lines of 40 people, and we stood across from each other and did speed networking. And
Nope, fuck that.
When I found out we had to do this, like every fiber of my being just wanted to like crawl inside of itself.
Corporate social, forced social situation.
Oh my God.
It's like the antithesis
like,
of 5.
I do not. I so did not want to do it. And and it was basically just like, you each had 90 seconds to answer 3 questions and then move on. And so like for 45 minutes, like that was a thing.
Oh.
So like every 3 minutes you're moving. So like, across like 15 people, and it was so loud. So you had to get right up in each other's faces. And so we're just like spitting in each other's faces. And like, I woke up the next day with a sore throat. I'm like, oh, damn it. And so it was just like right off the bat, super, super draining.
It sounds traumatic.
It was a little bit traumatic. But there was something about that week, that over the course of the week, even though I was doing a lot of social stuff, at some point, alcohol probably helped a lot, but at some point, like I stopped this story in my head that I didn't want to be there, and I wasn't, like and I don't know what point this happened, but like I noticed it, where I'd stopped trying to pull away and disconnect. And when I started to engage, I became more energized. And it had to be like, I think a part of it was like over the course of the week, I found like people that I knew that I could connect with. And so I spent more time with them, and we had really like great experiences and dinners and stuff. And then by the end of the week, like I didn't want to go. Like there's a part of me that was like, I don't want this to be over. And then I actually ended up staying another couple of days in the city in Montreal, which was fantastic. And I did this double-decker bus tour and was just sitting on the top of the bus riding around the city, and I was like almost audibly laughing. I was so happy, and that is just such a weird experience for me. Because it like I guess I'd had my social cup filled to the point where like when I was alone now, I was just letting myself enjoy life. And it was a surreal experience for me. But it was awesome. Like I've been learning over the last few months. Each time I stop that pattern of pulling back and instead like engage in whatever it is, that whether it's with Amy and the kids or if it's with work stuff, I'll notice like positive shifts in myself, and I'm having to do that more and more and get used to that pattern so that I can recognize how to get back there more often. And that's sort of like my goal over time, to where I can get to where, hey, I actually enjoy life. And on average, I enjoy life more than not enjoy life, because I have an awesome life. I should enjoy it. And I just like have not been able to let myself enjoy it.
That's great. That's good news.
All right. So where are we on the ladder?
We're at level 5. So for 5 and 4 are really similar. They call 5 detached, preoccupied, and 4 conceptualizing, preparing. And like if you read the descriptions of the book, they're not that different. But I'm just gonna talk about like basically the dead middle, the average level. And this is where I think we spend a lot of our time. This is where the 5 is like sharp, probably incisive, but very heady. And the bias is brain knowledge is the only knowledge. That's the bias of basically the 5 type structure anyway. But we'll get to like relationships and intimacy are okay here unless they interfere with my work. then no.
Right.
But you start to see the value of them. But there's this big mind body disconnect in the average level, and level 5 for sure, of like we're still not embodied here at all. It's like we're floating head, doing our head thing, whatever that is for us. And I'll just go right into 4. Like that's going to be similar, but this is where you would start to get some impulse to share yourself, but you wouldn't be quite ready. So in level 4, the sin, so to speak, of the 5 is avarice, which is the hoarding of the self. So in level 4, you start to get a little bit of that lift. So you're kind of like, maybe the world would like to hear my music or read my writing, but it's not ready. Like I'm going to just work on it some more.
Yeah.
Oh man, I definitely have spent the majority of my life in this middle section.
Right. Yeah. Well, and also like if you were ahead of me in this progression, so like if it wasn't for you being a little bit ahead, this show would have never happened.
That is true.
So
I remember the conversations we had at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. You really had to like hold my hand and talk me off the ledge there. Because I was very much in I think I was in the 5. Yeah. In 2019, 2020, I was level 5 for sure. And it took me a little while to get, or maybe 5/4. And yeah, it was a hard place to be in. Because I don't know if I would have ever, I think I was willing to give up music because I never wanted to put it out there again. I think I was willing to give up a lot of the things that I loved because I felt incredibly paralyzed by self and just didn't know how to get out of it at all. Yeah. So definitely relate to this level in a deep and visceral way. Because I think I hate it the most. That's the thing that I hate the most about myself is the hesitation and wanting to keep it all to myself and not take those leaps, because I respect that so much about like 8s, 7s are a little bit more chaotic about it, but 8s, they have these big ideas and they just go for them, and they see the big picture and they're willing to go for, do the things, and then they become millionaires. It's like
fucking reckless about it, but they do.
Sure. Yeah, and they probably ruin a lot of lives on the way there, but like that's not what bothers me. I think that's what bothers me is that they were willing to do it at all costs, and I kind of want that in myself, and so I think I feel that more now than I ever have. Hopefully not the ruining of lives, but definitely the doing the things that I feel passionate about and feel certain of at all costs. I'm definitely feeling that way a lot more now. And so, yeah, it's a tough place to be. And I feel like, yeah, you're probably right. That's probably where we all live the most of the time, because every 5 I know is kind of in this place a lot.
That's probably the motivation to to integration within yourself, that you are admiring 8s, because that's essentially where you want to grow to is like, here is what I have to say. I don't give a fuck. Like if it's, you think it's not ready, here it is. Like that's what 8s do best. Mm-hmm. And that's what 5s can do in the highest levels, which we'll get to.
Cool.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, Cody, because like I think that I spent more of my time in those higher levels, like 2018, 2019. And then in 2020, at the end of 2020, when we first recorded, like I'd been through so much that year. Like after we recorded that first one, it wasn't that I didn't want to put it out there, but it was just like, I'm overthinking all of the things that come around. Like I knew when we first recorded, I'm like, this is going to take off. And then that almost made me want to not do it. So for like 3 or 4 months. We didn't record again after that
Yeah.
first episode. And most of it was on me. I mean, I had a lot going on, but also like I that was an excuse for me too, like because I was going through like 2020 did a number on me, and this was around the time when I'd started my job, and at that point I'd finally like I realized how much stress I had been under, and I let myself like feel it for the first time, and I just sort of fell apart. And so I'm like I was definitely in an emotionally fragile place, and I didn't want to put myself out there again at that time. And so it was hard for me to launch the first season. A lot of it actually came because of Cody, and he was excited to like get it started. And so we finally just had to set a date, and then like it was May 5th, like 5/5.
Yeah.
That's when we launched. And they wouldn't have, if we hadn't like if we hadn't done that, it wouldn't have gotten done, because it basically just like forced me to, okay, we've got to record, we've got to like get this stuff out there.
Yeah,
Because
you
at
led
that
me
point,
to
I
the
wanted
edge
to
of
do
the cliff and told me to jump, and then you stood there.
it. Yeah, pretty much.
Well, good thing there's both of you, because probably if either one of you was trying to do it alone, it might not have happened. It sounds like you were trying to
Definitely.
launch it from like a level 4 or level 5 place. And
Yeah.
any 5 who's ever put something out in the world, like, you know, if it's like you, Cody, art, music, or something like this, like they've had to coach themselves through this process of like, you do the whole thing and then you're like, I don't want to hit publish. Like, I don't want to, whatever the last step is. You're like, no, I take it back. And then once it's out there, you're like, oh my God, I don't want anyone to see it. That's
Yeah,
like,
I still do that. I do that with all music things. Like whenever I post something for the first time, whether it's a social media post, a video, you know, any kind of performance, anything, I post it and I'm like, okay, it's done. And then I immediately have to like basically try to stop myself from compulsively checking to see what everybody's doing or how they're reacting to it, because then I'm like obsessing about how it's landing. And yeah, it's like I really do have to kind of like constantly coach myself off of that ledge of like not getting too obsessive about it. And
Well, part of that too is that we love data.
That's true.
So as soon as it's out there on social, it's like, oh, I wonder, you know, what the data say.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. I mean, with social media, that's been a tough one for me, because I'm probably more involved in social media now than I've ever been. But and I don't know if time will tell if it's an excuse or I really do love the data to give me an excuse and permission to obsess over it. But I do really love the data and have seen great growth and progression on social presence for myself, just watching data, like just watching what people react to, what they don't react to, trying to tweak it here and there and letting it become that puzzle in that game. You know, that's been the hardest. It's kind of a strange thing, but yeah, that keeps me from being obsessive in a weird way, because then it's like not personal.
So Sam, I'm really curious for you, because you've done a lot of social content, and you put out a lot of amazing content. And I'm always like, how do you do that? How do you keep yourself going and like, you know, putting yourself out there like that?
okay, so if you go into level 3 here, it's a lot about, it's called in the book Focused Innovative. It's a lot about mastering a body of knowledge and skills that no one else has, so that you can feel competent because you have no competition. Because you know our whole fear around being incompetent. So
Right.
it's like just reading from the books directly, not wishing to compete with others. They prefer to explore new ideas and forms. So their tinkering can result in profoundly original ideas, inventions, and art. So I basically hacked my way into level 3 by doing a dissertation, which by definition is something that no one's ever done before.
Right.
So that inspired a lot of confidence, because I don't feel like I'm in a position to be really critiqued by equals, because it's like, it's innovation. So that inspires a lot of confidence. So that's answer 1 to your question. And then answer 2, I guess there's 3 answers. Answer 2 is I'm a sexual dominant, which is the counter type of 5, and I like attention if I'm engineering it.
Ah.
So that helps a lot. And then thirdly, not every time anymore, but almost every time I make a video by myself, I'm doing pretty well when I do like something collaborative where someone else is in the video. Pretty much every time I do a video by myself and post it, I'm like, I fucking hate this. I can't look at it. Like, why did I do this? Why am I doing this? And that has never stopped.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. That makes sense though, because every time, and going to your first answer, every time you make a post, you know that you're putting something out into the world that like it's your thing, like it's your voice. And so, yeah, that makes sense that you would, because it's easy to justify that and overcome the fear of putting content out into the world if you know that you're basically like putting your name on it. You know, it's like, this is my shit. Like no one else can do this.
Yeah, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
And then I think also in this level, you get more generosity. I don't think I'm like living at this level, but I can capitalize on it. I can get some aspects of it.
Tap into it.
There's more generosity, and there's more of this idea that like you are important to the world in some way. Like you should be or can be giving of yourself, and that's helpful. And then it's like, you know, a little bit less of like a know-it-all body of knowledge and a little bit more of like knowledge as is useful to others, or in your case, Cody, like art as is to be enjoyed by others. It's like giving it away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
I would imagine that it's not just head knowledge at this point. Like you're probably sharing parts of yourself, your experiences, more of your heart, and that helps. Like to me, that would help me feel like when I've done that sort of like with this podcast, like that helps me feel connected, and it helps me feel like I'm sharing not just like things that I've learned, but the things that I've actually experienced. And that's why that's really, when you were talking about the sort of like no competition expert thing, that was the exact conversation that Cody and I had. Basically, was like, if we're going to do a podcast together, it has to be something that like I can sit down and talk about with no prep. And that's why we landed on this, because this is the only thing I could think of. Like I'm not an expert on anything. I don't consider myself an expert in anything except my experience, as like my lived experience as a 5. Like, and so that's, and I feel very confident in, you know, being able to talk about that ad nauseum as people have experienced here with the show.
There's also no other Enneagram 5 podcast as far as I know. So
Yep.
It's not like, you know, I have to be better than another thing, which is really uncomfortable for 5s.
Mhm.
Like I can just be. And that's when you get 5s really shining.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Definitely why I love doing this, for sure.
I've been all the way down the levels with mental health challenges in the past. I would like to think that I've touched level 3 and spend much of my time around level 4.
I think I live at level 3, and I can say that with confidence and comfort. I aspire to, at some point, move to a level 2 or a level 1. I think I have glimpses of that. And I tell myself, I suppose that will come when I get ready to retire someday, and I'll have that kind of time. Although that's probably an excuse on my part. I suppose one could make some of the endeavors of 1 and 2 a priority, but comfortably level 3.
Cool. Well, we got 2 levels left.
Yeah.
really-
So the way that I'm conceiving of it, the next one, like we can probably at least touch on it. This would be like the visionary. So 5s letting go of our fear of incompetence, letting go of our fear of rejection. We have inner knowing, trust, and most importantly, embodied wisdom. and this is like, to your point, Josiah, this would be where we get a lot of other types of knowledge. So it's head, heart, spirit, if you like, body, all equally. And I can say I've had this like a few times for a few days, like probably at best. But I remember when I was doing my Enneagram training, and that's, a really supportive environment. And it's basically like you might as well be in therapy from like sun up to sundown the whole time. I ended up feeling like being really in my body, at least at this one I'm thinking of. And I would just say things like they just came out of me. I didn't think about them first. Which anybody fives who's listening, they know that how different that is. Like we all think about shit before we say it. And so that's much more eight like. It was just like flowing. And then this lady who's sitting next to me was like, oh, like, I think you're the smartest person I've ever met. And I was like, what? Like, I'm not being smart right now. Like, I'm not trying to be smart right now. This is like the compliment that I spent my whole life wanting to hear. And I didn't get it until I just like got the fuck out of my head and stopped overthinking everything. So it's really integrated. I mean, it's like completely, you have to be really in your body, feeling your body, and realize that that wisdom is beyond just the intellect, and kind of letting that flow through.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that also might be a good place to mention, because I've had a lot of conversations with people about the Enneagram, and me from my layman's level of understanding of the Enneagram. And I do have the Wisdom of the Enneagram, and I love that book, but like, I'm just, can only have so much information in one time in my head. And so people are always like, okay, integration versus disintegration. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how does that look in, like, how does that work in the context of the Enneagram? And this is a good example of like what you're talking about, like integrated, meaning like well-rounded in your person, and taking all of that into account, I guess. And so
all aspects of your being are integrated.
Right. That's a good way of looking at it. I like that. Just wanted to highlight that for a second. Cool.
Because for fives, the mind body separation is almost happening at every level that we've mentioned, until you get into these, 3 and above for sure, but even 2 is, it's really hard to get sustained embodiment for fives. And I wish I knew how to do it so I could tell everyone how to do it, but I don't.
Yeah. I like when you describe that, I can definitely think of, I can definitely recall 5 or 6 times in my life where I've experienced that. And to your point, it doesn't usually last super long, like a week or 2 at most. And I had never thought about it being a result of embodiment. Usually it came around when I had some sort of like huge pattern interrupt, like when I deconstructed from religion, or when I left my job to start my own business, or like earlier this summer when I had what I called my Christmas Carol night, and you'll have to hear about that when the season comes out, Sam.
Okay.
And that's kind of blowing my mind, thinking about how, like, to your point, we spend so much effort in our heads to achieve this level of knowing that we will never achieve because we're not embodied.
Yes, you got it. That's the thesis of this episode.
Nice. Love that. Well, now I got to know what 1 is.
Write that phrase you just said down somewhere, like in the notes or something. That's exactly it. That's kind of all you need to know about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And this is also true with every type. It's like your greatest fear, which in our case is incompetence, actually comes true because you spend so much of your time and energy trying to avoid it.
Oh,
yeah, it sucks. If you know older people who are 5s, which I do, especially, unhealthy, they become quite incompetent later in life because they've spent their lives avoiding things that make them feel incompetent. Therefore, they never learned how to do them.
Yeah.
Actually, we could maybe do a whole episode on incompetence, but when you let go, become unattached, non-attached to, appearing competent, is when you actually achieve it. Okay, so Buddha level.
Buddha level, or I call it sage mode.
Okay, Buddha level. So I guess this would be the one that we probably cannot aspire to. But in the book, they call it participating visionary, although I see the visionary thing happening, in level 2 a lot. This would be basically like pure non-dualism. So letting go of the belief that we're separate in any way from our environment and from other people, and sort of living as one. Like, we are everything. We're part of everything. Everyone is us. We are everyone. If you ever done psychedelic drugs, you might have felt this for a couple of hours. And it's like all of the stress we carry as fives, a lot of it comes from separateness. It takes a lot of energy to maintain separateness. When that goes away, it's a huge relief. And it's very easy to feel like in the flow, or to feel connected, to feel safe, all the things that fives don't feel. So I think most of us probably won't achieve this in a sustained way, but we can probably have tastes of it.
Oh man, I'm gonna start crying.
Oh,
just because I well, that's true. I have tasted that, like, in just little, like, I've had little glimpses of that, and it's the most beautiful thing. And I hadn't thought about it being a result, my basically the block being a result of separateness and how much effort we put into that. I always thought that my separateness was something that happened to me. And that's been a big learning for me in these last few months, is my separateness is something that is my response to what happened to me.
Ooh, put that in the notes too. That was good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, you're doing it to yourself, just in your unconscious. So yeah, it is a response. And it does actually, fives famously have the lowest, along with nines, the lowest energy of any type. And this is because this is where our energy is going.
Interesting. It's like that weird, like out of date software, like program that's running in the background that we don't realize is taking up all our CPU.
Exactly.
It's the Chrome of our life. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I've never experienced one. I don't think, not really, not enough to be able to talk about it. But I guess I'm behind you guys. I
haven't without help. I mean, occasionally, like when I was in a really healthy period, I meditated and did yoga every day. I could get it in meditation sometimes, but for minutes. I mean, not for long, and psychedelic drugs as well.
Yeah, mine came for sure. Mine came as a result of doing self-hypnosis 3 times a day for 90 days. So that did a number on me, and I was able to like access more of that for a while after that, but I never have been able to reach a sustained level.
Oh, in labor also. I don't know how many women listen to this, but who have kids, not always, depends if it goes well, but like my second birth, it was an unmedicated home birth. Absolutely was. I mean, it hurts still, but it was like this state of like, there is no mind. You are life. Like, life is you. You're just a vessel. Like, it's really beautiful. And that completely changed my life, or, since then.
Oh my God. Now that you mention that, my first experience of being the most embodied that I've ever been was when, so I was Amy's birth coach, and we labored together all night. And it was mostly just the two of us in the birth room for most of that time. And it was the first time I'd ever really experienced feeling like I was in the moment. And it was because it was just me and her. And it was so primal. and so beautiful. And it was just like us, and we're bringing this life into the world. Oh my God. It was amazing.
Now I might cry. Josiah, the hormones. Come on. What are you doing to me?
Sorry.
Well, we did it. We got through the whole lot.
There's all the
man.
levels. So
Sam, thank you so much. This was amazing.
caveat for anyone listening who's like, oh no, like I'm at level 7, or like there's no judgment here. We all are in all of these throughout our lives, circumstances, age, like all types of things, and there's no shame in it. And if you're like at the lowest one, it's not impossible to get to the highest one just because you're at the lowest one. It doesn't quite work as linearly as it sounds like. So this is just for reference of understanding yourself,
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as anyone who's listened to this podcast long enough knows, like Cody and I have definitely spent plenty of time down in the lower levels. And to me, what's helpful for me is just like a recognition of, where when I'm in any of these states, I can recognize, oh, I'm disintegrating. I'm going down in that, and I can catch myself, and also like remind myself that there's nothing wrong with me. This is just part of this journey of being a 5, and then having these higher levels that I can look to, and realize that it just takes some work to that inner work to get back up to that place, and being able to have that sort of vision of where I'm heading is always really helpful for me.
Definitely. Yeah. Agreed. Well, cool.
Well, Sam, this was fantastic. Everyone go check out Sam's work on Instagram, Enneagram Sexpert. You also have a website. We'll link up in the show notes.
On Instagram, it's Enneagasm, ENNEA_GASM.
Yes.
Enneagramsexpert.com is the website.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic, and we are definitely going to have you back on again soon.
Thank you. So fun.
Hey, it's Josiah, and I wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you're the type of person who likes helping others, would you do us a favor and share it with other people like you? If you found value in this conversation, they will too. I also want to give a special thanks to our community members who shared their voice with us in this episode. If anything in this conversation has resonated with you, or if you have any further thoughts or questions, I want to invite you to join our community of other people like you and continue the conversation at Enneagram5.com.